To recap, over the last 2 videos I've released, I've looked at Owlboy, the indie platformer by D-Pad Studios that was in development for almost a decade, and Final Fantasy XV, a game that also took Square Enix 10 years to release, even though it's not quite finished. But today I'll be completing this trinity of games from development hell with Team Ico's The Last Guardian. Team Ico's last game prior to The Last Guardian was 2005 Shadow of the Colossus, and it was shortly after that the team began designing their next big game, with Fumito Ueda as director. Their new game was teased over the next couple of years before officially being announced as The Last Guardian during E3 2009. After this, the game would be continually delayed due to development issues, with the game being too visually demanding for the PS3, the original console it was planned to be released for, to the point that it was thought that this game would never be seen by the public. That is until the PS4 was released, and at Sony's 2015 E3 press conference, a full 5-minute trailer for the game was shown, and it was announced that it would be released for 2006 for the next-gen console, which would then become an October 25th, 2016 release date. The game would get one more delay to December 2016 so that the developers had more time to fix bugs. But now that the game is finally here after almost a decade of development, I will ask one more time, was it worth the wait? While I've never had a strong affinity for Ico, Shadow of the Colossus is one of my favorite games, and like many others, consider it to be a strong argument for video games as art, up there with the likes of Journey and DOA Extreme Beach Volleyball 3. So it's hard for The Last Guardian to get out of Ico and Colossus' shadow, no pun intended, due to how much it relies on a very similar framework. A small boy in an unfamiliar land speaking a made-up language, an ancient setting that seems to be long deserted and has a hidden past, gameplay centered around climbing up and down structures, an animal companion, a vague supernatural entity for an antagonist, and a love of bloom effects. Though The Last Guardian's strengths and weaknesses aren't how it differentiates from previous Team Ico games. Upon starting a new game, you're put in the role of a young boy covered in strange tattoos waking up in a mysterious cave, and this is where you meet the large mythical creature named Trico, who will be your companion for the rest of the game. Unlike the relationship between Wanderer and Aggro in Shadow of the Colossus, we see the very beginning of the boy and Trico's, which starts more as a relationship of convenience more than one of friendship or understanding, but develops as the two rely on each other to escape the place they're entrapped in. As the game progresses and the mystery of the land is slowly revealed, the dynamic of Trico and the boy's relationship shifts and grows. Without going into spoilers, the overall story feels like it's part of a traditional folklore narrative that grandparents tell their grandkids, and deals with themes of companionship, isolation, and emotional attachment, and this is where it really succeeds. Exploring this strange land with your new animal friend while depending on each other in order to move forward feels unique, and shows the types of stories we can explore in video games. Much of the game's story is told through actions rather than long, overextended cutscenes, which, while in line with Team Ico's minimalist style, isn't something we see in big-budget games anymore. This even extends to the design of the characters, specifically Trico's. Trico's design seems to be intended to invoke feelings of attachment in the player, as its appearance takes after elements of cute animals that are typically domesticated in modern society. The face and body of a puppy dog, a cat's eyes and tail, bird-like feathers, talons, and wings, as well as a mouth that is shaped like a beak, and some goat-like horn nubs for good measure. While Trico's chimera look is somewhat unique, it's based off traits the majority of players will likely be familiar with through family, pets, or general media, so it's easy to become attached to Trico itself by association. Since it's composed of common animal parts, I suppose it wouldn't be impossible to make your own Trico. Please be advised, this channel does not advocate nor condone animal cruelty or playing God. Do not attempt to make new breeds of animals by taping pets together. Thank you. While being a mythical creature like a dragon or phoenix, even the cat bird dog's mannerisms are very animalistic yet innocent, which allows his movements to be quite expressive. Trico tilts his head inquisitively, looking similar to a confused puppy when unsure what to do, but has cat-like eyes that reflect light, which gives it a threatening look in dark areas. It swats at food barrels like it's playing with its food and whimpers when lost, however when it's threatened it becomes ferocious. It's these mannerisms that give the feeling that Trico is a living thing with its own personality, and not just a computer AI with an animal-looking model. Speaking of, Trico's model is also likely why The Last Guardian was delayed for so long, due to the fact that it's quite large, and each of Trico's feathers is rendered and moves individually, which couldn't work on the PS3 as it would have been too much for its processor to handle. It was important for Trico's model and movement to be as realistic as possible though, because if it was too artificial or video gamey, the player may not have developed the kind of attachment to Trico that the game's story needs them to have. The relationship with Trico is also essential to the gameplay. Throughout your journey, you're presented with puzzles that require you to climb up architecture or find and pull levers. While much of the world seems to be oddly built for a child to move through it, you will encounter problems that can't be solved by your small frame, and that's when you have to call in Trico. You will typically be climbing onto the big animal to reach higher places or use his size to move things. When the armored knights that litter the area come in and try to carry the boy off, Trico can smash them to pieces, acting as your guardian. You aren't just a parasite using Trico for his protection though, as the creature equally relies on you. After Trico gets into fights, you have to calm him down by petting him and remove any spears that may be lodged in him. There are small barrels hidden throughout the game that act as Trico's food source, but they're typically in locations that it cannot reach, so you have to go fetch them and feed Trico. This is important to do as Trico will stop moving and lie down when it's hungry, so you won't be able to move forward until you find the barrel hidden in the area and bring it to your furry companion. That isn't the only thing that causes Trico stress though. Around the environment there are painted glass eyes that hypnotize Trico, becoming fixated on the glass, and you will need to climb up and destroy them in order to progress. Eventually the knights start to use these, and you will have to fight along Trico to fight against them. For much of the game you have to rely on each other, however, since you just met Trico, it won't be immediately obedient to your every order, and you may have to wait for it to come to you or do what you ask it to do. The problem with this is that the AI itself isn't always reliable or prone to do what you want, so anytime you run into an issue, it could be one of three things. A. Trico is acting like an animal with its own personality that doesn't do what you want at the snap of a finger. B. You're doing the wrong thing or telling Trico to do something that isn't an option. Or C. The AI isn't working properly. Unfortunately, there's no real feedback system to tell you which it is, so if Trico's misbehaving, you have no clue if it's something you're doing wrong or it's the game not being properly optimized. I appreciate that Trico moves in its own ways, doing its own thing, and isn't just a tool for you to progress through the game, but when you're meant to jump and rely on Trico catching you, only for it to watch as you fall to your death, you can't help but feel your relation with the big animal becomes strained. Much like Team Ico's other games, The Last Guardian also has some of the most beautiful, awe-inspiring scenes that you won't find anywhere else in the industry. The overall color palette is quite washed out, which sells the ancient aesthetic of the setting and allows for the more colorful moments to really pop. However, you can tell that the game wasn't completely optimized for the time of release, as there were quite a few times where the screen would dip to black randomly when the camera would clip through a wall or something, which makes the game look like it's constantly going into a cutscene. Also similar to Team Ico's previous games, The Last Guardian's music is outstanding, and I would argue that it even lives up to Shadow Colossus' soundtrack. The atmospheric score really immerses you in the game's environments and story. It has this haunting yet beautiful sound that complements the tone of the game's story, going from a flowy piano melody to a more tense piece using an orchestra full of string instruments. Is it clear I'm not a music expert? Takashi Furukawa does a great job as composer, especially since the only other video game he composed music for was the 2010 GoldenEye reimagining. Well, whatever the case, The Last Guardian definitely has one of those soundtracks that I could see myself listening to when mellowing out while doing research or studying, but can still create an emotional response when added to certain moments within the game, further demonstrating how important music can be to a game's story. Overall, The Last Guardian lives up to what you'd expect from a development team like Team Ico, a game that, while it doesn't surpass the Shadow of the Colossus, stands on its own merits and gives a unique experience that you don't get in any other game. My journey with Trico felt touching, and I really enjoyed the time spent with the big cat bird dog, even when his AI caused me to fall to my death. While there were technical issues that hindered my enjoyment, I'm glad that I finished, because the ending makes up for all of it. The Last Guardian is just one of those few games that will leave a lasting impact on you if you're open to it, and it was definitely worth the wait. I have to say that 2016 was a great year for games, showing the huge range of things you can find in video games from hyperactive action, engaging gameplay, and emotional stories. I only hope that 2017 will have just as many surprises. Anyways, thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed. If you want to keep up with me in the new year, you can always subscribe to keep up to date on new videos, and if you want to see more right now, there's my review of the 2D Dark Souls clone Sultan Sanctuary, or there's the Devil May Cry series retrospective, which will soon include my analysis of DMC3. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.